A desert planet with twin suns.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Use my knowledge. Much to learn. You still have.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks Regs. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening. And I just want to shout out anybody who has been listening consistently and has been keeping up with this podcast. I really appreciate your support. It's not easy to build a following, and it's actually quite difficult. And I'm trying my best. I'm really trying to work out a way that I can put this out on all streaming platforms. I just am trying to figure out a way to get a steady flow of cash into this thing before I can do that, because I don't really want to be putting cash into this and not be getting anything out of it. So I'm just funneling cash into it, and that's just not a desirable thing for me. But I am trying to get that nailed down soon, hopefully, so that I can reach a broader audience, hopefully in the future. That being said, today we're talking about ships to know from the original trilogy. And so if you're not familiar with that terminology, the original trilogy refers to the first three movies that were released by George Lucas back in the 70s and 80s. So this is New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, episodes 4, 5, and 6 chronologically, which I know is a little bit confusing. But these are the original movies, hence the original trilogy. And I was just going to go through the major ships, starships that you should know from this period of time. So let's just dive straight into it.
Gentlemen, who wants to be an ARC trooper? I do, sir!
Welcome back to ARC Trooper training, folks. So, like I said, today we're going to be going over major original trilogy ships. So, first of all, I'm going to start with the Empire side of things. So, for those of you who are not familiar, the Empire were the bad guys, at least from the point of view of the protagonists within the Star Wars galaxy at the time. And so the Empire was a galactic regime that took over after the Republic was reformed into this empire by Supreme Chancellor Palpatine after the Clone Wars ended. And it was essentially just a very authoritative and imposing regime that really had their priorities set on galactic order at the expense of freedom. So, the major components of this Imperial Navy, as it's referred to, would be the Star Destroyer. That was kind of what their navy was built around. And these Star Destroyers are the big triangle-shaped ships that are essentially just big fortresses that house many, many troops at one time. They're Venator-class Star Destroyers that were upgraded from the days of the Clone Wars. And they're just massive troop transports that often operated alone, either alone or in fleets. They didn't have too many companion ships with them. And they are probably the most iconic Imperial ships, aside from maybe TIE fighters, which I will talk about later. But there are a couple different variations of Star Destroyers. We have the standard ones, which you see, like, that's the first Imperial ship that you see in Episode 4, A New Hope, where it's just a triangle with the bridge with the two shields on top, and the shield generators on top, and it's the most iconic. There are also Super Star Destroyers, which are even bigger, that you see in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. And I just like to say that starships are not what I'm best at when it comes to Star Wars. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have too many details to go into about all of these different ships, but I know the names and I know generally how they were used. So we're just gonna be going into that. I will recommend a Star Wars YouTube channel that I follow. I've plugged Star Wars Theory quite a bit, but for my like Star Wars Starship / space battle strategy type content, I go to Eckhart's Ladder. They're really fantastic. He's the one with the Doge as his little profile on YouTube, and I think that he's a really, really cool source for info. I would say that Star Wars Theory is my favorite Star Wars YouTuber, but Eckhart's Ladder is one that I have been following very recently and has definitely given me a lot of great information that I've used to share with y'all on this podcast. So if you're interested in that, once again, don't stop listening to me, but feel free to also listen to them. Just remember stick to your roots, me, but also enjoy other people, because this is a big community and people have different strengths with where their knowledge is the most useful. And so I know that mine isn't necessarily in this arena, but I know that I can give a lot of good basic information. So we got the Super Star Destroyers, which are absolutely massive. We see them in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. And then we have Interdictor Star Destroyers. And these are actually only seen in Star Wars Rebels. We might see something similar to them. Actually, maybe they're present in Episode 5. I'm not entirely sure, but they essentially have these giant bulbous attachments to them, which are able to pull ships out of hyperspace. And so they're extremely effective and extremely powerful and extremely dangerous for those traveling in hyperspace, because you were essentially a sitting duck whenever you got pulled out. It was very sudden, and you didn't really have any warning from it. So moving forward from Star Destroyers and their different classes, we have TIE Fighters, which were the second, or I'd say even more prominent just because of their sheer number, but probably slightly less iconic, if not just as iconic as Star Destroyers. But they're the ones that do the little... That was a terrible, terrible impression of a TIE Fighter, but you kind of get the gist. They have like a little like shriek as they fly through space, even though there's no sound in space. But they kind of look like a bow tie almost, which is how you can remember them. They're the ones with the two platforms on the outside and the little pilot's bulb in the middle. And they were the attack fighters that accompanied these Star Destroyers that were the main capital ships. And these TIE Fighters were super fast and very sensitive to maneuvering. And they didn't have shields, which was a very big drawback. And they also didn't have hyperdrives. But they were very effective and very hard to shoot down. We see these in all of the original trilogy movies. We see them especially in the final Death Star run in Episode 4, A New Hope. And there are a couple different classes of TIE Fighters. We have TIE Fighters as we know them, which are just the two platforms with the cockpit in the middle. Then we have TIE Interceptors, which have like more triangular wings. We have TIE Bombers, which were capable of dropping photon bombs or just regular bombs and causing massive amounts of damage. And then we have Darth Vader's iconic TIE Fighter, which had the curved wings. And so all of these were different variations of the basic TIE Fighter design. We also had Imperial shuttles, which we see transporting Chancellor or Emperor Palpatine at the time onto the Death Star. We also see that the Rebels have commandeered one of these, codenamed Tiderium. For anybody listening, Tiderium is the name of that Imperial shuttle. And I will know, for those of you listening, I will know who has listened to this podcast of my guests that I have on this show, because at some point that will be a Rank of Master question. Just throwing that out there. I will ask someone, what is the code name of the commandeered Imperial shuttle that we see in it's Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and it is named Tiderium. And I will ask that as a Rank of Master question eventually. And someone will, if they've listened to this podcast, then they'll know it. It's Tiderium. I've said it many times now, but I just want to say that, and I'll be able to call them out if they get it wrong. Anyways, that's what they are. They were essentially just transport ships for high-ranking Imperial officials. Then we also have light cruisers, which are essentially scaled-down versions of Star Destroyers, which were used more in fleets. There were probably 2 of them in a given sector, and were just put into effect whenever a full Star Destroyer wasn't necessary. And there were also like different transport vehicles that were able to like carry TIE fighters through hyperspace and stuff like that, which I'm not really going to get into. They're a little less prominent. So that's all that I really have for the Imperial side. I'm going to switch over to the Rebellion side. First off, we have X-Wings, which I would say are arguably the most iconic Rebel ships. They're the ones they aptly named. They look like they sound. They have the wings that have the crisscross X shape. They are very prominently featured at the end of A New Hope during the attack on the Death Star. That's what Luke flies. And they are, I would say, just the most iconic. I think that they need very little explanation. Y-Wings. They were utilized in the Clone Wars and then carried over into the original trilogy. They were primarily bombers. They utilized photon torpedoes, and they, once again, look very much like the letter Y. They have the two boosters in the back. They were also present at the first battle of the first Death Star, and very iconic. Then we have A-Wings, which were more attack-based, quicker fighters, which we see like Phoenix Squad all flew A-Wings in that was Star Wars Rebels. Then we have B-Wings, which are also, they're a little less prominent, but they're kind of like, they have a very strange shape to them, where there's a cockpit on one end and then just a very long ship. And then they were very maneuverable though, and they had rotating. They had, the ship was able to rotate around the cockpit as the focal point, which was a super interesting design. U-Wings we really only see in Rogue One, but it's a super cool ship design with the wings that kind of go all the way out and then they fold back in, and it kind of looks like a little two-pronged fork. And that's really all the different wings. This is another, okay, dude, I'm giving y'all so many Rank of Master questions right now. And once again, if you listen, future guests, then you'll know these questions. But one of the questions is going to be, I'm going to list out two options. I'm going to say, like, there were X-Wings and Y-Wings in the Rebel Navy. And there were three other known ships that were named after letters. What are the other ships? And so the different ships are X-Wing, Y-Wing, A-Wing, B-Wing, and U-Wing. If you listen, I just gave you answers. Just a little incentive to always be catching up with this podcast. Anyways, moving right along. I would say the most iconic ship in all of Star Wars would be the Millennium Falcon, which is my favorite ship, just because I'm basic. But it has been since I was a kid. I love it so much. I have a giant toy version of it, and it's just so cool. And so the Millennium Falcon was a Corellian YT-1300F life freighter. And it was piloted at the time of the original trilogy by Han Solo and Chewbacca. And previously it was owned by Lando Calrissian, who lost the ship to Han Solo in a game of Sabacc, which is a card game, which we see happen in Solo, a Star Wars story. And the Millennium Falcon is just an awesome ship. It's the fastest. It's one of the fastest ships that we know. We know that it made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. And it's just the most. It's in my logo, or my little graphic that I have for my podcast. I put the Millennium Falcon in there, and so if you forget what it looks like, that's it right there. We also have snow speeders, which we see utilized in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, at the very beginning on Hoth, whenever they are taking down the AT-AT walkers. There are also Mon Calamari class cruisers, which we see utilized by a majority of the fleet. Those are the big capital ships that the Rebellion utilized, like the one that was helmed by Admiral Akbar in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Those are the big, kind of like almost round-looking ships. They're super cool. They have very sleek designs, and so those were designed by the people of Mon Cala, known as the Mon Calamari. Those are the goldfish-looking guys. And then we also have the Tainted 4, which was a CR-90 Corvette. That's the very first ship that we ever see in Star Wars in Episode 4, A New Hope. and it's what Princess Leia was being transported on whenever she was boarded by Darth Vader and captured at the beginning of A New Hope. And so that was it's I'm pretty sure an Alderaanian style ship that was that one, the Tantive 4, was used by the Organa family. And so, and then lastly, and this is a Rebels ship, but it still ties into the original trilogy, which is the Ghost, which was a modified VCX 100 light freighter, which was utilized by the Ghost team in Star Wars Rebels, helmed by Captain Harrison Dula. And it's just a super unique ship, which I really love the design of, and I do really enjoy Star Wars Rebels. And eventually I will have someone on here to help me out with their favorite things about Star Wars Rebels, and I will bring you a Star Wars Rebels roadmap eventually as well. And also the Ghost had like a small attack shuttle within it called the Phantom. It's a really cool deal that it can kind of detach from. It's awesome. And then lastly, we have the Slave One, which has caused some controversy recently. I'm not going to get into that, but that is Boba Fett's ship that he utilizes. So that is a modified Fire Spray 31 class patrol and attack craft. It's the one that kind of goes up, like it starts off horizontal, and then it comes up vertical and flies away. It has a very iconic sound to it. We see it also utilized by Boba's father, Django, in Episode 2. It's a really cool ship. And so yeah, that's the Slave One. And it's a very infamous ship, and I'd say arguably one of the more iconic ships that aren't like utilized by a navy. So I'd say that it's probably only second to the Millennium Falcon as far as its recognizability. So that's all that I have today. If you notice that I miss any significant ships, feel free to email in twinsuntalks@gmail.com or comment on Instagram. DM me on Instagram. We're at twinsuntalks. Or comment on our YouTube channel, which is Twin Sun Talks Podcast. Contact me any way you would like, and I can read it out on this podcast, give you credit if you'd like. And I'm always open for any corrections that y'all may have for me. That being said, this would not be a proper episode if I didn't leave you with just a little bit more. So, for the more today, I have that Michael Jackson was good friends with George Lucas, and he attempted to secure a role in Star Wars as Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace, but Lucas ultimately casted the iconic Ahmed Best for the role instead. So I just found that rather interesting, and it's pretty entertaining. Fun fact, side note, that Michael Jackson also attempted to buy the Spider-Man franchise just to cast himself as Spider-Man in any Spider-Man movies that were going to be made. And I think that that is absolutely baller. And that is all I will say about that. Anyways, that's all that I have for this episode today, friends. I really hope that y'all enjoyed it and found it informative. This week, if y'all are keeping up with the Bad Batch reviews, I definitely won't have it out by this Friday. It'll probably be out Sunday at the earliest, but probably not even then. I'm going to be very tired. I have a long week. I'm on a work trip, and so I appreciate y'all's patience, but it probably won't be out until probably sometime early next week, either that or maybe Sunday. But anyways, you've taken your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I really can't wait to talk at y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.